Hi, I'm Brian King, and this is Marriage Monday. I want to talk to you today about becoming a married man. If you think you can get married and not have to change who you are, how you act, how you spend your time, how you spend your money, if you think you can do marriage without change, then you're in for a rude awakening. And if nothing changes in you, then chances are your marriage won't last very long. When I first got married, I wasn't ready. I had no idea what the magnitude of change that it would require. And honestly, I don't think most men are. It's not something that's taught. That's part of why so many marriages struggle and fail. We go in thinking marriage won't require transformation. But the truth of the matter is, it does. It requires a huge change. Now, some people frame it as a sacrifice, but I think it would be better framed as growth, because it's not really a sacrifice. You just need to grow into it. You need to become a married man. And becoming a married man means growing into someone new, someone capable of loving, leading, and serving beyond himself. It takes a lot of work. Think about, how do you become a professional, say a doctor? You don't just read a few books, get a lab coat, and go to work being a doctor. I mean, sure, you study and you train, but then before you become a doctor, you have to follow a doctor around. You have to have a residency program. You work next to a doctor, you start doing everything that that doctor says and does, and when you get good enough at it, then they let you become a real doctor. You pass the test. But the only way you really learned to be a doctor was by doing the things that doctors do over and over and over again. Now, there's no residency program for marriage. Maybe there should be. We just get thrown in, and by trial and error, we figure it out. We had some examples. I kind of had an idea what it was going to be like. You kind of go in thinking, well, we'll live together. We'll play house. We'll both have jobs. We'll do this. We'll do that. And you don't really realize the amount of change that you're going to have to go through. Now, when you become a married man, yes, you give up your single life, but it's kind of like the doctor. When he was going through school, he may have been a bartender or a dishwasher. You wouldn't say that he was sacrificing his bartending career to become a doctor. No, he was growing into something greater. And that's what marriage is all about. When you say you're giving up your single life, technically, sure, but you're gaining something so much greater. You gain purpose, you gain partnership, you gain legacy and love, and you're building a life that's bigger than yourself. Now, for me, it didn't really kick in until we had our first child. That's when I realized that every decision I make, everything I did affected my family. It wasn't just about me anymore. I started taking marriage and fatherhood very seriously, not as a burden, but as an honor. You could say I grew up, but I think it's more than that. Because I was already grown. I was out of the house since college. And I was grown up. I was earning money, earning a living, doing the things that were necessary to maintain where I was at. But when I got to that point where I held my first child and I said, he is totally dependent on me. And everything I do is going to affect his life and my wife's and the rest of our family that was yet to be born, because I knew we wanted more kids. I started seeking out good examples of what a husband and a dad should look like. I had some, but I really needed to get more and more training. I needed to see what dads do. I needed to see what, husbands do and how you build on your marriage. And basically I embraced becoming a married man. So what does it look like? Like I said, it's not sacrifice, it's true growth. You end up, You take responsibility for how you spend your time and your money. You work diligently towards goals. You know, I progressed in my career not because, I was um, egotistical, but because I wanted to have a better life for my family. You consider your family in every decision you make. And yeah, you have to give up your single habits. You don't flirt anymore. You don't spend excessive amounts of time gaming. You don't go and hang out all night at places you shouldn't be. You're home. You're working for the family. You have to do dishes, you have to change diapers, you have to be part of the family effort. And you balance your life so that family gets the best of your time, your passion, and your love. That's what being a married man is all about. You're leading. You're leading with love and maturity and purpose. You know, I went through career changes because I wanted more for my family. I wanted to go somewhere and be, more than I was. And it's a growing process. And I'm still growing. We all are. And it's a mindset, though, that you have to, realize that you are creating a legacy for your family. You're creating um, a better life for your children by moving forward and doing things that are good for your family. It's time well spent. Becoming a married man is, in essence, becoming what a real man should be, because you're taking care of business. You're making sure things get taken care of. You're growing, and your wife will grow too. She'll come up and meet you at whatever level you rise to. So don't worry about that. But the good thing is, it's a it's a process that you can do one day at a time. You don't have to do it all at once. Sure, there's some things and some habits you have to stop, like no flirting. An obvious one. But the other things, you can work on your career over time. You can work on understanding your wife and meeting her needs over time, because it's going to take some time to figure out. The biggest challenge is to embrace the process and to realize that you need to change, and that change is growth, not sacrifice. So don't fight the changes. That's the challenge. Don't fight the changes that marriage brings. Lean into them. Becoming a married man isn't about losing freedom. It's about growing into the man your wife, your family, and your legacy need you to be. It's exciting. It's an exciting process. It's a growth process, and it's a winning process. So I'm going to continue this talk on Winning Wednesday and talk to you about some of the things I had to do, some of the experiences I went through, some of the things I failed miserably at, and then regained by working at it, and talk about how to win. So that's coming up on Winning Wednesday. Embrace the changes that are required to become a married man. That's it for today. I will catch up with you on Wednesday, and thanks for listening. We will see you next time.